So I'm joined by Chris Isaac today, and Chris approached me, and I've known Chris more or less all my life, and he approached me regarding triathlon and specifically around the minefield that is triathlon, because Chris is new coming into the sport, hopefully looking to take it up, in the coming months, coming years, or whenever that may be. But you've dabbled a little bit, because I know you've done a
Couple of events.
swim-athlon with, was it called a swim-athlon? I think it was,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah, it was in Monmouth, wasn't it?
Yeah, and really good event. So if anyone
Yeah.
wants to look it out, they'll look it up. Check out the Monmouth swim-athlon
Aquathon.
challenge or something.
Aquathon, mate.
Aquathon, that's the word I'm looking for.
That's
I'm
the
supposed
one.
to be the expert here. Yeah, so yeah, well, look, it's a bit of background. I've known you probably since the age of four,
3 or 4, yeah.
3 or 4.
Yeah.
So 36 years later,
3 or 4 years, yeah.
we're at a point, and I'll ask a question now, and because we just had a conversation off camera, and it's
Yeah.
probably good to revisit it.
Yeah.
But the motivation now for you looking at triathlon is what?
It's it just comes down to kind of like you get to that point in your life where you kind of realize you're not invincible anymore. I'm 39, going on 40 now. I played football for a team since I was 7, 20, 25 years, and then fitness afterwards. So fitness for me has never really been something I've thought about because I've always done it. I've always been running. I've always been doing some sport, regardless what it is. Uh, Even now, I get on a field with a bunch of people, and I'll be the one doing more running than everyone else. I've just got that kind of level. But you get to a certain point where you then start going and you realize you haven't got those reserves because maybe, just maybe, you're not looking after yourself as well as you should be, you're not eating as well as you should be, and you're not doing the training to warrant the reward of being able to do it. And I'm very much kind of in that, getting to that phase now where I think, if I want to do something and get into it more, then I need to do the work a lot more than I have been, in fairness.
And I think I was in a similar position, and a few years before you, that my body was just starting to break down a little bit more than maybe the people around me. And the people around me, because I come from a football and rugby background, as you know,
Yeah.
and what I was finding is the people I was playing against were getting younger, and specifically in rugby, they were
Yeah.
getting bigger. I
Yeah.
seemed to be getting smaller.
Yeah.
Um, but more importantly, it was my legs, and I don't mean that in a fitness point of view. I mean that physically. I
Yeah.
could run in a straight line relatively well, but it was that movement where I had to change direction. And
Lateral movements.
and I, and I tell you what, since I've given up football,
Yeah.
because that's mainly where the movement change sport that it's associated with, I've had no problems with my knees at all. I,
It's funny you say that because I think I said 2 weeks ago that I played five-a-side regularly with a bunch of dads basically, and we've been playing it for a few years, for probably 2-3 years now. Always really enjoyed it, and then we went back after lockdown, playing a big tennis-side pitch. It's quite big down in Liswerry, and yeah, running around. I haven't played for ages. Obviously, been doing some running, and then I rock up, quick turn, 5 minutes towards the end, go over my ankle. No one anywhere near me, down I go. First thing I thought, broke my ankle, swells up like a balloon. It's now 8-9 weeks later, and I run on it. I can do flat running on it, but any kind of lateral sideway movement is kind of like, it's not great. And uh, I'll mention work later, obviously, because that's part of different issues as well in terms of shift patterns and everything else, and being active and different elements. But ultimately, that has kind of been a bit of a wake up call as well, because doing something makes you feel better. So going and playing five-a-side once a week kind of rolls you over with fitness, and you think, oh, I'm not as bad as I think I am. But you kind of then you get one injury, and I'm different to you, and I know obviously for years you had issues with hamstrings and different body parts. I never really had injuries, the
Yeah,
most
I
I've
was
ever
going to
set
say,
with an ankle.
you generally have been quite good, haven't you? I've
Yeah.
never known you to have a major injury, which
No.
maybe a niggle or two, which has kept you out for a week or week or two max, but
Yeah.
never something major.
Yeah. But like now it's got to that kind of age. And I remember because after 4 or 5 weeks, I went to the hospital just to get it checked because it just wasn't getting better. And the nurse just said to me after his x-ray, she said, "Oh, the x-ray's clear. It's just your age." Uh,
Yeah, you're getting old, man.
Granted, I'm old, I'm younger. I was quite a bit younger than she was, but she wasn't wrong. And she said, "Look, it gets to a point now where it's going to be 6, 7, 8 weeks before that starts feeling better." And then
Yeah.
it kind of hits you there, and you're kind of like, "Oh, Jesus, really?"
And
Uh,
you hit the nail on the head just now, where you said we're not invincible, or we don't feel
yeah,
invincible anymore. Like when you're in your teens, and specifically your teens anyway, and then going into your 20s, you just feel you can go forever.
yeah,
And I got to a point where I was playing football, I was playing rugby, I was going to the gym a lot. So physically and core strength and things like that, I was really good when I first came into triathlon. But it doesn't take much when you get older to knock you off that sort of fitness
yeah.
level.
Off that course, isn't it?
Yeah, it does, and you're not invincible anymore, and that's why I think I moved towards triathlon because I can't necessarily control when I get injured if it's out of the blue. But what I can control is not being tackled by someone in football or
Yeah.
rugby
The
and
impact
falling
injuries.
awkward. Yeah,
Yeah,
I can run in a straight line and it's all about me. I can
yeah,
cycle in a straight line. Yes, I can't. You can't sort of factor in cars and other people hitting
yeah,
you, and you've got to forget about that.
yeah,
And the same with the swimming. You just go in a straight line. There's
yeah,
it limits what the stresses you can put on your body is what I'm saying.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I think that's the main kind of thing. Like I said, I've got to that point now where it's like I I want to be more serious about how I look after myself, how I do fitness, because without a certain base layer of fitness, I don't know, you want to be a role model to your kids who are growing up, like obviously two young boys, they're both playing rugby. I never want to be that dad who can't go outside and play with them or do this and do that. Don't get me wrong, probably going into triathlon is a bit probably extreme for most dads, but I would rather be the fitter dad rather than not fitter dad. And
But
I get the
I, I,
benefits
I
of
think
that as
both
well.
yeah, I think both of us though are a real good example of when people do come into triathlon, and I
Yeah,
say this on Life of Tri all the time, that people are older coming into the sport, and the sport has an issue with that because it's not necessarily capturing them at a younger age.
yeah,
However, there is a knock-on effect that I think if you're coming into the sport at an older age, your kids then will see you doing that, and that
exactly.
might be a benefit to the sport longer term.
Yeah,
But what I was getting at is triathlon is seeing a lot of people moving away from team sports and the sports that they love doing, and for whatever reason they can't do it anymore. Whether it be
yeah,
fitness, whether it be the physical demands on the body, whether it be lifestyle,
yeah,
and triathlon and sort of like normal running is benefiting from that because people like you and like me who have been active most of our lives are still looking for something else.
looking for
We
that
don't
challenge.
want to. We don't want to be that fat dad in the corner,
Yeah,
not being able to do sports day, or
yeah,
for whatever reason.
yeah, yeah, 100%. And that's the main driver. I do. One of the coaches for my youngest is rugby, and he's a character, shall we say? But he gets a massive kick out the fact that I'm there and I'm running around and I'm doing that with him and helping him coach out, and he really enjoys that. And that's what I get out of it. I'm not doing it because I particularly want to give it my Saturday and Sundays, but he's there doing it, and I want to be able to part and give something back to the club.
So,
Uh,
so,
which
so
is
let me ask you a quick question, right?
go on.
And I tend to ask this to a lot of people that I talk to, regarding the podcast and things. And normally I ask them retrospectively because they're already in triathlon, but you're a little
Yeah,
bit different because you're looking to get into it. Are you going to do it for one of three reasons, or potentially a fourth reason, right? So are you looking to do it for general fitness? Are you looking to do it um, for a challenge? Because a lot of people will sign up, like they sign up for a half marathon, they do the
yeah,
half marathon, they're done.
Yeah.
Or are you looking to do it from a lifestyle point of view? So some people do it because they want to be part of a club. Some people
Yeah.
do it because they want to be part of a community. Or is it a totally different reason for you doing it?
No, to be honest, the three things you said there are pretty much spot on. But I think the main one that pulls out for me is more the lifestyle. Uh,
Just to keep fit and healthy
just
and
to keep fit
active.
and healthy, yeah, and just have that kind of motivation. Don't get me wrong, the challenge aspect is definitely part of that as well. Obviously, you helped me with this when I had my new Garmin, and thank you for the advice on that one, because it's a really good watch. But I have previously been on Strava and used my phone. It wasn't really a great success. But then I've linked up and stolen some routes off my neighbor who's an avid runner. And she said, oh, just be careful because it is addictive. And once you start running with it and you start doing your times and everything else like that, then you'll see what other people are doing and it'll motivate you more to do it. So it's that kind of that virtual online challenge.
Yeah.
And that's something after a very short amount of time, I'm already kind of picking up on. I did a 12-hour shift night before last. I had a flyer for half hour because my colleague who I worked with had half hour before. I came home and I got here about 6 o'clock. Everyone's asleep, so I had my stuff changed just before I left and had an half-hour run. I didn't have my watch on because the environment they're working is quite physical demanding, shall we say. I don't want to cause any damage. I'm doing a good half-hour run at a nice little pace, but as far as Strava's concerned, it never happened.
Yeah,
It's a bit
and it's funny that you say that because it is addictive, and I've gone the other way. And as you know, I've been injured for a little while now,
yeah,
and so when I do run, I don't run with a watch anymore.
yeah,
And I'll get to a point that when I am training, I'll use that watch. But I definitely went through that period of, oh, I've just done a run, got to upload it to Strava. Where am
yeah,
I on the leaderboard? But more importantly, where am I as regards to my pace? Have I got
yeah,
any PBs? And then all of a
yeah,
sudden you're like, oh, this is amazing. I'm gonna follow this person and try and beat their time. And
yeah,
I had a King of the Hill once or whatever it's called, a segment where
yeah, yeah,
I was top, and
yeah,
it was near where I used to work, and it was a bitch of a hill, and
yeah,
it wasn't very long,
yeah,
and I held it for ages, and it was on a run on the way home, and I used to run back home, and that particular route I think was around 14 miles. So bearing
right,
in mind now, this was back when I was training for Ironman. I was fit,
yeah,
really healthy,
yeah,
and this segment probably kicked in at about 6 miles, and it was an uphill, and it probably lasted for about 400 meters, and I held it for bloody ages. And
yeah,
then someone just came along and blew it out of the water. And I
yeah,
swear, right, that this person must have driven there and
yeah,
then just sprinted up the hill.
just
Because
that
no way did they do it as part of like a
part of
long run
a
or
longer
anything.
run, yeah.
But I was gutted. I was absolutely gutted that I lost that segment.
Yeah, it is weird because like I said, I've got my neighbour who's a very good runner. I've got one of my wife's friend who's a really good runner. They both run locally in this area, and I've been stealing their routes basically because I've lived down in Newport, so it's a nice little. There's plenty of routes around here, and there's a lot of nice places. But I found myself on my first 10K in quite a bit of time, and I'm going a particular way, and I'm getting to a point which is just a lot steeper than I thought it was. And you're trudging up this hill and you're thinking, I don't want to stop. So I'm blowing, yeah, I'm really struggling, but I don't want to stop because it's going to affect the pace and it's going to make me look a bit bad. So you just keep going, keep going, keep going. And mentally, just knowing that did push me forward and I did get through it. But it was like, I know for a fact if my old like Timex triathlon watch with just my stopwatch and everything else, I wouldn't have done that. I would have stopped. I would have stopped. So it has been for that mental kind of push beneficial on one or two runs already.
And it's interesting, right? Because the technology should be should be that advantage. It should give the metrics that you get from it should just be feeding information and constantly updating your plan. But in reality,
Yeah,
there's only a small amount of people out there that can fully take in that data,
yeah,
understand it, to churn out the changes that they need then for their training plans.
yeah.
And none of us are professional
No,
athletes.
no.
So I often say to people, the technology is there as an aid, and ultimately, you should just be very careful, because I used to
You never
do.
take over.
Yeah, no, it does, because I used to do one of
Yeah.
two things, right? And I used to constantly be looking at my watch. How far have I gone? That was the one thing. How far distance? It's all about distance. And the other thing is, how fast am I? My pace,
Yeah.
or my pace has dropped here. And my thought process has changed totally as regards to training now. Whereas when I first came into the sport, I used to train like a bitch, in the sense of I used to push hard. Every training run, every training ride, and every swim would be at as close to race pace as possible. You can't do it. All
No.
the
No.
literature out there says do not do it, because you are gonna burn out. And to a certain degree, that's what happened. When I came into the sport, I signed up for Ironman Wales in September 2013. I spent probably 4 months then running around thinking, Christ, what am I going to do? I don't know anything. So I got all the equipment. I finally then probably started training with about 7 months out, maybe 8 months out from the actual race, which was enough time. I had a general fitness, but what I didn't have is fitness for each of those specific
Yeah.
disciplines. So what I'm getting to is, I had 7 months, and I thought, what am I going to do? And I pushed hard
Yeah.
for probably the first 3 to 4 months. I pushed really hard to get to a level which I thought I needed to be at. And what happened is, I had a warm up event to the Ironman, and a couple of weeks before that, my calf went, and I really didn't know if I was gonna be able to go on any further.
Yeah.
Luckily, I got back to a point, but it really affected my training. It probably knocked me back 4 or 5 weeks. And again, like I said, it's because I pushed too hard. I was looking at that watch all the time. Oh, how fast am I going? Oh, my heart rate needs to be higher. And I've totally flipped. And
Yeah.
now, when I am training, I'm probably 80-20 split. So 80% I'm at a lesser pace, lesser heart rate, because I do preach heart rate training, and
Yeah.
then the 20% is that preparation for race. But ultimately, if you're not training for a race, you don't need to be at race pace, if that makes any
Yeah.
sense either.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and I see this with people so they sign up for a race as a challenge, and
Yeah.
I'll take just plain running as an example here. And if someone has signed up for a half um, marathon, you see them training hard constantly, and
Yeah.
then they're wondering why closer to the date they're getting niggles. It's because every weekend they're doing close to a half marathon at race pace.
There's no
and
recovery.
and people often say in triathlon, you got the three disciplines, but there's a fourth discipline, which is rest and recovery. There's potentially a fifth discipline in the transition, and another one in race nutrition and hydration.
Yeah.
But the recovery is probably equally important as the training, if not more important than the training.
Yeah.
And people don't think it, because we're not wired in that way. A lot of people think, oh, I didn't train hard today, so I need to I'm beating myself up about it.
Yeah.
Or they think um they have a rest day, and they think, oh, I really need to be doing something. And a rest day doesn't need to be sat on your ass on the sofa. It
Yeah.
can be an easy ride, it can be an easy swim. But a lot of people think they have to train hard every day
Yeah.
to see benefit.
And I'm 100% with you there. One of the things you said earlier on about the three reasons for doing triathlon, one of them was just having that event in your head and just going for it and then doing nothing afterwards. One thing I've done now, and this is more long-term planning, is just not putting myself down for any form of events at the moment, because all I want to do is kind of build up those layers, uh, mainly around the running, just build up that cardio. And then once I'm happy with what I'm doing or at a certain level, and then maybe look at something,
Yeah.
because you're absolutely spot on. I think if you come straight into it and you don't do the work and you just focus on one event, you'll hammer towards that event, you'll do the event, you'll have that moment of exhilaration, and then where's the focus? It just kind of stops, doesn't it? And I'm
Yeah,
conscious.
look, I ended my first season in triathlon. I had done two or three races. I can't remember what it was. and it ended with Ironman Wales. Ironman Wales in September,
Yeah.
and there is a sort of known period within triathlon, and I suppose you get it in other sports as well, where you get to the point you've hit the pinnacle, you've
Yeah.
achieved what you wanted to achieve, and you've
That's
completed
that.
that event, and you have a massive down after it.
Yeah.
You have the proper blues. You're like, and it's because you sort of lost direction. You're like, I've had focus for the last 12 months, and I've known what I wanted to achieve, and I worked towards it. And then afterwards, you're like, I don't have to do it anymore.
Yeah.
And but this is a really important point, and there's something I wanted to that this one of the reasons I ask the three questions at the beginning of why you, or the question of why you're doing it, and then the three answers from it,
Yeah.
is because people come into the sport, they don't have a background in the disciplines, swim, bike, or run, or maybe they have a background in one of them, because I know you've done half marathons previously.
Yeah.
And they go all out as regards to equipment, and we may as well move on to equipment now. But they go all out, and they buy everything, and they spend hundreds, if not thousands upon thousands of pounds to get
Yeah.
to a point where they have one race, and then everything is on Facebook Marketplace afterwards, because
Yeah.
they've either hated it,
Yeah.
or they did it as a challenge, and it's a one-off, and that's like, and that's why I say to people, come in, try the sport, and if you like it, then spend the money.
Yeah.
And because with equipment, you don't need to buy brand new. You can buy secondhand, you can buy a lower priced item, or you can borrow from friends and colleagues and family.
Yeah.
Well, look, you did the swim run event with me.
Yeah.
You
Yeah. Yeah.
borrowed a wetsuit.
The wetsuit. Yeah. Yeah. The wetsuit off you. Yeah.
Why would you go out and buy a wetsuit, which is potentially hundreds of pounds,
Yeah.
for an event which, yeah, you may have only ever done once?
Yeah. Yeah. But you know yourself, many people do it, don't they? And I know I've done it before with different bits and pieces, never extremely, because I try not to throw it away. But I say that with my watch I've just bought. But you know, it does happen, and that's another one of those pitfalls you want to kind of stay away from, isn't it? And that's the main reason why when I say lifestyle, that is definitely what this is, rather than anything else. It's just keeping that element going and just having that focus. But in terms of the actual the breakup, I know you said you know how you break them down. One of the main questions thing I had for you more than anything else was, I like a run, I love swimming, I really, really struggle with a bike. I know we've had a conversation before, and you said come out on the bike with me. Uh, for anybody else that's ever been to Aberdeen, obviously, my way of learning to ride a bike was being thrown down the hill in Aberdeen Park, where we've got a Stonehenge, with my dad being told off by some woman in her 70s. I've never been a very strong biker, and I'll push it in there now. Obviously, being a police officer, I've been to plenty of RTCs where people have been knocked off, and just kind of lacking that confidence, especially with a bike.
Yeah,
You know?
look, and people come into the sport, they've got three sports to master. Inevitably, one of them is going to be a weak discipline.
Yeah.
So, my first experience with triathlon was Ironman Wales in 2011. Not my personal experience for me doing it, but a friend signed up. He signed up. He couldn't swim a lap within the pool. He physically could not swim. So he had to learn to swim, then get his fitness up to even get to the start line. And ultimately, this is a bit of a downer story actually, but he got timed out of the swim.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there's no sort of like silver lining with this story, but
Yeah.
it just shows how difficult
Come back
the
after.
sport can be. But going back one step,
Yeah.
and that's the event as well. Everyone
Yeah.
thinks that you potentially need to sign up for an Ironman. You don't. You can do
Yeah.
a sprint.
Yeah.
You can do a super sprint, which is less distance again. And it's all relative to where you are.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to be this macho person to sign up for an event like Ironman just because it's seen as the done thing to do.
Yeah.
And my advice to you when you come to physically look at an event, try one of the shorter ones first. Look for
Yeah.
a sprint. I'll come
Yeah.
and do it with you.
Yeah.
And by only doing an event, you actually learn what happens during race day.
Yeah.
But ultimately, when it comes to the bike is probably my weakest discipline as well. You know, we grew up together. Would
Yeah.
spend Friday nights in Aberdare swimming pool just
Yeah.
messing around. We were
Yeah.
never part of official sort of clubs, but
Yeah.
we swam a lot.
Yeah.
You
We were
know,
very
we played
comfortable
a
as
lot
well.
of football. We ran a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
Yes, different fitness, but we had very good fitness. But I remember growing up that most of our mates had mountain bikes, but you had a drop handle. You were ahead. You were ahead of the game, surely.
I was ahead of the game. I think that was just my parents had said, "Oh, we're looking to get you a bike," and I think I just saw it in a shop and bought it. It did me no good because when everyone else was going up the hills on their mountain bikes and going off road, I was stuffed before I started. But yeah, I think it was an orange. I think it was an orange Apollo or something like that. But yeah,
Orange and white.
my brother had one as well. I have no idea
Yeah,
why we
no,
both.
your brother definitely had one. Yeah, I remember there
Yeah.
was two of them in there.
Yeah, I have no idea why, but yeah, I had that bike for years. I don't know whether it's some kind of childhood trauma of cycling around on that thing as well.
Yeah, well, maybe. But look,
Maybe.
ultimately, it comes down to a couple of things with the bike, and you've got a road bike, haven't you?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I thought you've got a giant, if I'm
Yeah.
yeah. But a couple of things happen, right? And this might not necessarily apply to you, but a couple of things happen when you come to be an adult and you jump on a bike. Chances are you've never been on a road bike previously. You have because you
Yeah.
used to have one. But straight away, people notice that the tires are thinner. It's You have a lot less control over it as
Yeah.
regards to, you know, a mountain bike has these
It's
big
a mountain
chunky
bike.
tires, lots of
Yeah.
grip, and so on and so on. People automatically think that they need to be clipped in, that you don't.
Yeah.
I would highly recommend that people at least try to be clipped in, or at least
Yeah.
try it somewhere,
Yeah.
because it's everyone's fear when they come to a road bike. They like, I'm gonna be clipped in. I'm gonna fall over. And I'll tell you what now, everyone falls over at some point. I've
Yeah.
got so many different stories. People on the podcast will be sick of me saying the stories, but I've got so many where people just fall over traffic lights and things like that.
Yeah.
You just dust yourself off and get up and do it. I first time I got clipped in, I was on my new bike. It wasn't brand new, it was second hand, but it was my new bike. It was
Yeah.
sparkly. It had no scratches on it, and I bloody fell. And I fell where I sort of like threw my body onto the floor, so I lifted the bike off so it didn't scratch
The
on the floor.
bike.
And I ended up being like a turtle lying on my back, but with the bike up in the air.
The bike up in the air, right?
Yeah, but ultimately, the best thing that you can do is go out with someone who's confident
Yeah.
cyclist and learn from them, right? You learn all sorts as regards to how to cycle with someone else and in a
Yeah.
group. Little things like just learning what a couple of um, signs mean. So when you're cycling along, you know, normally, as you know, you've learned green cross code or a highway code or
Yeah.
whatever it was called.
We did
That
the
if
we
you
did
want
the
to
thing
turn
together in
right,
school, didn't we?
yeah, you would turn your arm, you put your arm out and things like that.
Yeah.
All that applies, but there's other little things like just showing where there's potholes in the road for the cyclists behind you. If
Yeah.
you're gonna maybe there's an obstacle in front of you like a parked car, so you might just move out around it, not physically turn. So you might just want to give someone a cycle like that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it comes down to confidence, and it comes down to going out with people who are confident as well.
Yeah.
And what will happen over time is hopefully you get to a point where you yeah, you just feel more confident. I tell you what, one of the biggest things for me was, if I cycle up towards the valleys, and people who are on the podcast might not necessarily know this, but I live in Cardiff. If I want to get anywhere near any sort of hills for training, I've got to go up north from where I live,
Yeah.
probably 20 to 30 miles to get any sort of decent hills. We'll forget about Caerphilly Mountain for the moment, which is more or
Yeah.
less on my doorstep. But anyway, but in order to come home, unless I went down some gravelly paths or went round a really long way, I have to
Yeah.
come round Corriton roundabout. And I tell
Yes.
you what, if there's something that can give you the confidence of being surrounded by cars, it's being
Yeah.
in a situation like that.
Yeah.
Because there's other roundabouts out there that I would clearly avoid simply because I had to go around a fast roundabout.
Yeah.
But it's funny, you sort of learn to boss the road a little bit, and you
Yeah.
learn to sort of like make yourself very visible to other cars when you're in that situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll come back to it again, but ultimately it comes down to gaining confidence by probably learning from other people. Because
Yeah.
I would have no issue, I think, or you wouldn't have no issue with the fitness. The
Yeah.
fitness would come, you'd pick it up really well. Where you live at the moment isn't particularly flat either. So in order to get out of your estate, for Christ's sake, you've got to go up a hill.
Up a good hill. Yeah.
But fitness wise, it's fine. It's just learning to get to that point where you feel confident, because
Yeah.
there will be cars around you, and
Yeah.
you've got to get used to it.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of the thing. You just have that bit of a mental block where you see some bits and pieces and you just think, oh, I don't want to. And funny, if it's a conversation I've had with plenty of people in work when I'm talking about different things, and a few of them have said themselves that they've looked at triathlon, or having that kind of having it for the challenge, but just the thought of being on the open road with some of the things we've been to, whether it's been a serious RTC, whether it's been a death, whether it's been this, it's been that. We had one of our supervisors recently missing a senior manager meeting, and he sent a picture in of him in a neck brace, and he'd been
Yeah.
smashed off his bike somewhere.
And look, it's the discipline that you're probably going to get the most risk within. If you are cycling, look, so I cycled with a group of guys every year. We go normally around Wales as a 3-day tour. The first year I ever went on that trip, one of the guys in the middle of mid Wales left the road. God knows what speed he was going, but he hit the tree, which was about 20 yards up the banking. He
Right.
must have, and Darren won't mind me saying this, but he's a big lad.
Yeah.
So how the tree is still standing, I don't know. But basically, he broke his neck.
Right.
And it was the first day we got to our location where we were all staying in a local bunkhouse. And it was a proper somber moment. We all got there, and the van, we got a support vehicle, and they said, look, Darren's been in an accident. We need to get over to the hospital. He's on his way there. And we were just like, Jesus Christ, what's happened here?
Yeah.
But it hits home that you are vulnerable on the bike.
Yeah.
What I would say is there are events out there
Yeah.
where you
Close road stuff.
there are on closed roads, and there are events out there which are on like motors motorsport
Wax and stuff.
circuits.
Yeah.
So they do exist if someone is that wary about it, because in theory you can do all your training on a turbo trainer.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't recommend it,
Yeah.
but if you're that fearful, you can do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I think you're right. This is getting out, and it's actually just going to your less busy road to start with, building up just confidence on the bike, and then just going from there. And eventually, you've got to get on with it, haven't you? Otherwise, you'll never ever do it, because, like,
Yeah,
you've
look,
done it
it's
after.
all about milestones, and it's all about getting to these points. And the next thing I was going to talk about was around goal setting,
Yeah.
and ultimately what you want to achieve. And part of the question has been answered around, are you using it as fitness, or are you looking to set a goal? But you can always break it down into what you want to achieve. And when I've spoken to people previously who said, right, I want to do this event, and exactly the same position as you're in now, but the bike is my weakest discipline. And at that point, you've got to then break down, before you even get to the point where you can talk about training,
Yeah.
into what are their barriers are getting on the bike and being confident. And ultimately with goal setting, that's where you've got to get to. It's because if you say to them, right, you are now going to cycle, I don't know, say they signed up for a half Ironman, you are now going to cycle 56 miles on open roads. They'd be
Yeah.
like, shit, no way. Or you are going to cycle 1.2 miles in a lake or in the
Yeah.
sea,
Yeah.
and you can barely swim at the moment, or you haven't swum for 20 years. That's probably where most people are. You
Yeah.
and people are like, can I do breaststroke? Well, you can, as long as you're fast enough for the cutoff.
Yeah.
So it's sort of up to them.
Yeah.
But what I was getting at is, people see the end goal and they're like,
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, how am I going to get there? Because what happens is they have this euphoric, I've signed up for an event. And then the moment of, shit, how am I going to do that?
Don't
And I
do it.
think you were quite unique here. If you were thinking about, I want to get to a level of fitness first,
Yeah.
and understand it, enjoy the sport, learn about it,
Yeah.
and then sign up to an event, I reckon you're in the minority. Don't get me wrong, there are people out there that do that, but I reckon the vast majority sign up for an event and think, Christ, how am I going to do this now? And,
I
and
think,
people do that with marathons. They sign
yeah,
up for a marathon. Yeah, I see it every year. People sign up for London
yeah,
and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to do London next year." They realize it's a ballot, and okay, they sign up, and then they get that email or they get the letter through the door that says you've been successful, and they're like, "Shit, I
what
got
I do.
6 months to train for a marathon. How am I going to do this?"
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, it's about breaking it up, and
What you
out of
said,
that,
the milestones there is spot on for me. The milestone one is 100% right. Just in that, if whatever event I do eventually sign up for, uh, I at the moment I'm doing maybe three runs a week, and then I'm trying to grab a 10K in every so often as well. Nothing major, but I'm building up those smaller half-hour runs, and then trying to get a 10K in, and just building that up. I had my first swim in quite some time last week. I probably scared the crap out of all the old ladies in bed. It's going like 10 o'clock at night, and I'm the only bloke there, and I'm coming in with my predators and my zogs, my everything else, and I go in the fast lane. A few of them jump in, and I'm blasting past them. I got it for a good old time. In fairness, I felt really good with it. Did about 2,000 meters, but it's making sure that I've got that base layer building for the run, the swim. Like when we did the duathlon last year, the training was the first time I ever jumped in a wetsuit was your spare in Cardiff swimming pool.
yeah. And I think I told you the story at the time. Like, I remember one of my other mates who had put on the wetsuit for the first time, and the first swimming session we had with him wearing that was a write off because
Yeah,
he just couldn't get used to wearing that wetsuit. He just
yeah,
felt really constricted around the chest. He couldn't breathe.
yeah,
And at that point, he was he was almost like giving up on triathlon. He'd signed up for
yeah.
Ironman and he
Oh,
almost gave up.
geez.
And luckily, we sort of talked him round and said, look, let's get over this first. Let's get you back in the pool. Let's take off the pressure of it's a training session and now we need to swim 2,000 meters. Forget about that. Let's
Yeah,
just get the wetsuit on. Let's
yeah,
just get up and down and do a couple of lengths. And that's
yeah,
what we did the next time, and it
yeah.
worked.
I tell you, it was a big one for me as well. Talking about the swimming element is obviously we did that duathlon last year. I know we mentioned it. Sorry, aquathon. I know we mentioned it. But having been in the wetsuit, going down to Cardiff, massive 50-meter pool. Obviously, we're used to the 33 meters of how random Aberdeen is, but that extra 17 meters is a long way. And I took a lot of confidence from swimming in there and doing those distance, and felt confident doing it as well. I felt like I was doing some good times and swimming well. But just going into that first swim in I think it was the Esk, wasn't it, in Monmouth?
Yeah, yeah.
And then you go in, right, this is what you need to be aware of. You need to pop your head up every so often. You need to look where you're going. You need to do your pointing. You need to be getting you acclimatized to the water because, geez, we obviously went up to start with against against basically the tide coming back at you, and then you come back down. I've never ever been so cold in water in my life. I couldn't breathe, and I'd
Yeah.
gone in there beforehand. I took everything aboard you said, acclimatized, and the first, I was breathing. I was swimming head out of the water because I couldn't get my head in because they felt like the cold was burning my lungs.
Yeah.
Uh,
What we should have done is got you
experience.
in a river by me. As but look, you've touched on a number of things there that people will not be used to. Swimming in a river, which is
Yeah.
cold, bloody freezing. No
Oh
matter
yeah.
what time of year it is, it will bloody hurt your face when you first get in, right? Especially rivers around by us, right?
Yeah.
Swimming against a current or with
Yeah.
a current is totally new. Brilliant when it's
Yeah.
behind you and you're
Yeah.
flying down the river, but
Yeah.
when you're swimming up a river and there's not much, um, you're not gaining any yardage because you're
Yeah.
swimming so hard against it. That's hard work. And then
Yeah.
the other big thing that people don't see when they do a triathlon, which is out of a pool, is they don't get that constant break of turning at a wall.
Yeah. Yeah.
And wherever you tumble turn or wherever you put your hand on the wall and kick off, it's a break. And what, for me, one of two things happens on race day that people aren't used to, right? They don't have that break. That's the first one. And then the second one is the physiological impact on the body. So
Yeah.
if you think about it, right, you've trained, majority of you are swimming in a pool, and you've
Yeah.
signed up for something like Ironman or even a half Ironman, right?
Yeah.
And then you get into a pool and you swim, or you get into the race, and it's in a lake or it's in the sea, and you swim for anything from half an hour to an hour to an hour and a half, depending on the rate. And the position of your foot is constantly flexed.
Yeah.
Whereas in a pool, every 25 meters, you will have that opportunity to close your foot, if that makes
Yeah.
any sense.
Yeah. 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 I know
And
exactly what you mean.
what tends to happen is people are not used to this. Their bodies are not used to this, and they will spasm. I used to think people are cramped, and it's not cramped because it can't be cramped because the race has only just started. They physically can't be dehydrated, or they could be, but they
Yeah.
shouldn't be. And
Yeah.
it's because their foot is in that position for longer than it's ever been previously.
Yeah.
And it, it happened to me on the long course weekend a few years back, and it wiped out my weekend
Yeah.
because my calf went into spasm, and well, it was like a pull. It was a really bad knot,
Ends you then, doesn't it?
and I suppose what I was getting to is when you sign up for an event, and hopefully you will, what you need to do always is replicate what happens in a race event. And the
Yeah.
swimming element is such a big one because people train in a pool and they never get in the sea, or they never get in a lake, or they never get in a river. And the pool is brilliant for your fitness,
Yeah.
but what it doesn't do then is get you used to the environment.
Yeah.
And
But
that's why I swim in the river near me, and I get really funny looks off people all the time. Um, but it does the job. It
yeah,
climatizes you to it.
I think I'm quite fortunate on here is we've got Llandego Reservoir down with us now, and that's anyone wants to check the website. In fairness, and they've done a cracking job the last few years. But they've got a water sports centre there now. They're doing paddleboarding,
Is
kayaking.
that a dive center?
No, the dive centre's Chepstow.
Oh, Chepstow, yeah, of
And
course.
they stopped doing open water swimming for a while. I'm not sure where they're starting back up, but they got quite heavily hit by COVID. But they're back to diving. They've got inflatable stuff there, and they're bringing that up a lot of there. I follow their page on Facebook. There's really good stuff down there. And I went down there for work once or twice, just speaking to staff down there. And the setup is really impressive. And they do one of the slate events down there as well with a mountain bike around. And that's not been so long ago. So they do some really good stuff down there. But Llandegfa is up by Pontypool, New Inn Way. It's a reservoir run by Welsh Water, and they've got a site on there now. Like I said, anyone wants to check out the website. It's really impressive what they've done in the last few years. But they're now really coming into the water sport element. They're just applying now for the water safety bits and pieces. And there's actually an open water swim series in Wales where you can swim there. There's one up in Snowdon. There's the centre up in Tredegar where obviously they've got
Parkman-Bach, yeah.
that's it. Yeah, they got that up there. But that's something I'll definitely be looking to get up there and doing some swims. They've got quite a few open taster sessions there up there now and to give you some direction. But touching on the swimming in a reservoir, one of the questions I would ask you is obviously you swam the open sea as well and done Ironman, everything else. How was that experience? Because that's all I've heard about, especially down in Tenby. You're talking about the jellyfish, the salt water. Hey, it just sounds horrific every time someone.
The problem is, right, people have a perception of jellyfish, which because they see them on the beach and they've washed
Yeah,
up, and they these massive things and whatever. And chances are, if you have one of the massive ones, then
yeah,
okay, fair enough. But I've swam in a race, and I can't remember if it was Ironman or if it was a long course weekend, where I physically put my hand on top of a jellyfish.
yeah,
Thankfully, it didn't touch any tentacles or whatever. But I had that moment where I stroked, my hand went into the jellyfish, so to speak, and I did
yeah,
that. Whoa! What was that? What was that? What was that? And then you can sort of see that there's a few around you, and this is the problem, that there's enough people out there that will tell you the bad stories,
yeah,
and what you need to really do is just concentrate on the good stuff. And
Yeah.
this is the problem with the sport. There is so much stimulus, there's so much input. And what you need to do when you're a beginner is just strip it back. You strip it back to what you need from a bare minimum equipment point of view. You
Yeah.
strip it back from a um, what you need to do. You strip it back from a training plan point of view. And because if you try and take it all in as a beginner, I don't think you'll ever do it.
Yeah.
You know, and so I've swam up in. We just mentioned Park Brimbach. I did an event up there a few years back, and they had the reeds were really long underneath. I think they've managed to cut them back in previous years, or since, sorry. But like people just didn't like that. They didn't like the fact that something was touching their feet before the
Yeah.
start of the race. I've trained over in the open water training center in Bristol,
Yeah. I
and
remember
if you
mentioning before.
stand on the surface there on the
Yeah.
surface, but the bed, it's like really soft, gungy mud, and your feet just sort of sink into it for about maybe
Yeah.
half a foot. Plus, where you get in the water, there's loads of carp,
Right. Okay.
and it freaks people out that they're there, and you get in about 5 foot away from them,
Yeah.
but they're harmless.
Yeah. Well,
And and again, I swam in the river, and I've like swam, and like my hand's gone into a carrier bag, and you have that moment of panic where you're like, oh my god, what's that with that? And then you
Yeah.
think, oh, it's just a bloody carrier bag, or it's just a twig.
Yeah.
Um, I've got another mate who swam an event, and he really freaked out because there was something underneath him. Turned out that he was in a shallow bit of water, and there was his shadow. So what I'm trying to say is that the mind will play tricks with you. It
Yeah.
will. You'll overthink everything, and you
Yeah.
can't in this sport. You've got to really, bring it back to basics. What do I need to do to achieve this? And the equipment is a really good example. You don't need a, a fancy bike for your first one. If you've already got a bike, whether it be a mountain bike or a hybrid,
Yeah.
fine, just use that.
Yeah.
If you can borrow a wetsuit like you did, do that. Do you need a fancy watch on race day? No, you don't. There'll be mile markers. There'll be people along the way who'll be able to tell you how far you've gone.
Yeah.
Do you need um to be clipped in on the bike with your pedals? No, you don't. So it's just trying to understand that your first race should be about testing the water, so to speak. Is
Yeah.
it for you? And I think I said it earlier, right? It's all right if the sport isn't for you.
Yeah.
But all I would do is encourage people to try it.
Yeah.
And one of the questions, and I just look at my notes here, that people always ask me, do I need a coach? Well, no, not really. Again, it comes down to your budget. If you've got a budget
Yeah.
and you want to really, have someone with a view on your training which isn't clouded, an
Yeah.
unbiased view is what I'm trying to say. A good coach should be able to say that to you. A good coach should be able to say to you, you're training too hard. Next week's going to be a rest week.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you can just pick up a training plan from anywhere. You can go to our website,
Yeah.
pick up a training plan, and
Yeah.
I try and say that this will be a bog standard training plan that will get you through. But what you then need to do is fit the training into your lifestyle,
Yeah.
not your lifestyle into training. Because the moment that you try to do that, just throw triathlon out the window, because it can't rule your life. Triathlon, especially if you're going longer distance, is difficult to fit in. I started the sport when I had no kids, I had no
Yeah.
dog. It was just me and Rachel, my wife, and we had our jobs, and that was it. She would run on the weekend. I would do some form of triathlon training. Always remember this. On a Saturday morning, she went to running club. She ran something like, I don't know, 10, 12 miles over an hour and a half, however long it was. She started about 9:30, finished at 11. I was up at 6 o'clock in the morning. I jumped on the bike. 5 hours later, I'd done 100 miles, and I was meeting her for coffee and the rest of the running club. And you can get away with that when you haven't got a family and other commitments.
Yeah.
But now I can't do that. I've got two
Yeah.
kids. You're the same. You've got a job which, your shift working.
Yeah.
It's difficult to say this week is going to mirror next week,
Yeah.
potentially, right?
Yeah.
You've got two boys who probably, you can take to football, you can take to rugby. They're at an age where they're doing things constantly.
Yeah.
So, and that's why you need to fit it in around your lifestyle.
Yeah.
You mentioned it earlier that you came home from work one day, everyone else was in bed, and you went for your run. Brilliant. I
Yeah.
encourage anyone to do that. I
Yeah.
also know people have got up at 4 o'clock in the morning to do a bike session
Yeah.
on a turbo, and brilliant if that works for you. I'm not the sort of person who wants to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I
Yeah.
will admit.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, what I was trying to get to is you need to see what you've got commitment wise in your life,
Yeah.
where it fits within the priorities. So for me, family is first.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I then have to work in order to fund my life.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
and triathlon comes a little bit lower down.
Yeah.
And again, that's fine. But I always say to people, try and work out what those priorities are first, because if you then are saying, "Oh, I'll train then and I'll train here," and your family are suffering for that, that's going
Yeah.
to hit you further down the line. It may work for a
Yeah.
couple of months,
Yeah.
but there's a reason why the term Ironman widow exists, and that's because when you're training potentially for an Ironman, you will not see your family.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I think the biggest kind of takeaway from me is just going to be a case of train when you can, train when your life allows you to do it, and definitely don't get bogged down with the what ifs and the buts and everything else. Like what you said there really hit home for me in terms of the bring it back to what you can do. So if you are doing an event, just make sure you can run that distance on your own. If to swim, then make sure you can do that distance. And then the bike, do be able to do those as individuals and then break it up and take your time. Don't go too hard. Don't start thinking, I need this, I need that, and everything else, and just try to make it simple. Because as you said, I think if you worry too much about it, you overthink it, it'll blow your mind, and then you'll
yeah,
do
no,
it.
it does.
You do it with it.
The only counter I'd say to that is the other thing that when new people come into the sport, they think, right, I've trained and I can run a half marathon, so now I can do a half
Yeah.
Ironman.
Yeah.
You've got to get to the half marathon first,
Yes.
and then
Yeah.
you've got to have enough energy left to complete it.
Do it.
So
Yeah.
things like brick sessions really work when so, and it's a great way of getting your training in as well, that you think, right,
Yeah.
okay, I need to do 2 bikes this week and 2 runs. Well, why don't I combine one of them?
Yeah.
And and that's why your training plan should be looking at, first of all, what can I do this week? And just because you don't have an opportunity to every Friday morning do a run,
Yeah.
you should look at it slightly different. In this week, I need to do X, Y, and Z. This is my life, and I need to fit it in around that. But I also need to take into account my rest periods as well.
Yeah.
And it would probably be better for you to drop a training session than to do 2 training sessions. So what I'm saying is, if you had a hard swim, oh no, so if you had a hard run tonight,
Yeah.
and then tomorrow morning you also needed to do a hard swim, but you were finding every week that hard swim, you just felt shit after it. Well, the
Yeah.
argument is you're doing it too close to the other event,
Yeah.
and
No
it's
rest.
about trying to understand how your lifestyle can sort of aid your training. So
Yeah.
in that case, it might be better not to have the hard run or not to have the hard swim,
Yeah.
and change it up a little bit. Maybe even
Yeah.
have an easy swim or an easier
Yeah.
run in the night before.
Yeah.
But people don't see that. They think that, again, going back to what I said earlier, they've got to work as hard as possible all the time.
Pain and gain, innit?
Well, yeah, and unfortunately,
Doesn't always
it,
work,
it
does it?
doesn't need to be that. And thankfully, the science is changing, which is saying that. Look, I'm aware of time, so there's a couple of other things I just want to mention.
Yeah.
um, swim, bike, run, brilliant. You've got to understand and you've got to do that training. The other thing is, I think triathletes fall down on trying to fit everything in, because you've also then got to think about strength and conditioning
Yeah.
and potentially flexibility. My
Yeah.
argument is the strength and conditioning and flexibility. There's no reason why that can't just be part of your daily routine anyway.
Yeah.
You don't need to go hard and hit the gym and come out looking like Arnie,
Yeah.
but you need to have relatively good core strength.
Yeah.
And off season will allow you to work on, you know, I don't know, your PB for the deadlift or whatever. That's fine.
Yeah.
But for the other time, because it's one thing that that's one of the reasons why I'm injured at the moment is I believe I came into the sport with really good strength and conditioning base.
Yeah.
I neglected it for a number of years, and now I'm weak around my core, my glutes, and
Yeah.
that's why I'm getting little niggles all the time with my running. And the other thing is, I have a desk job. Doesn't help. I sit
No, it
in.
doesn't.
I'm in a sitting position all day,
Yeah.
which my glutes are and my lower back are suffering for. Again, old age. I'm not as flexible and not as supple as I
As you
used to
said,
be.
unfortunately.
But anyway, um, so yeah, that's probably covered quite a lot of things there that
Yeah.
as a beginner you probably just need to consider.
Yeah.
What I would say is the gospel. I'm not. What I say isn't the gospel here. I just try and give people information for them to then make their own decisions. And if someone is telling you, you definitely need to do this and you definitely need to do that are outside triathlon rules, and when I
Yeah.
say rules, is what you do on race day. If
Yeah.
they are saying you definitely need to be training this way, well, I just take some of that with a pinch of salt because it needs to, like we've said already, it needs to fit around you, not the other way around.
Yeah.
So
100%.
anyway, mate, I hope that helped. Hopefully we'll get some training under our belts in the future, just me and you,
Yeah.
and we get you signed up for a race as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely, mate. Definitely.
But well, one I've got to get non-injured. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's a term, but it is now. And yeah, we gotta think about how we get you on the bike and get you a bit more confident.
Yeah. I'll definitely get on one of them with you, and definitely look forward to your assistance in moving me forward, mate. Definitely.
Okay, cool. Right, so thanks for listening and viewing. If this is on YouTube, I was going to say podcasts come out regularly, but unfortunately they're not coming out regularly at the moment. But check out YouTube.